All aboard. Welcome to part 2 of our Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast here. Jimmy is still around, and apologies for the delay, man. I'm telling you, as my computer's processing, and maybe I shouldn't just be using like a MacBook Air, but like it sounded like it was like an airplane. So I was like, even if I could get back in, like it would have been a disaster.
Would have lit on fire. It's like
What's
would have lit your whole desk on fire if you tried to record another thing.
It really would have. Like that would have just been it. And then I shouldn't say what firm, but the firm laptop would have went up too since it's next to it. So
would have looked like Russ is cooking,
Yeah, I definitely would have. And he did not cook last night. We can confirm that.
Well, I am upset with myself that I stayed up and watched that game through overtime. I big regret this morning.
If I did not play Melvin Gordon in Dynasty and then play Michael Pittman in my home league, I would not have watched that game. There was no other reason. And like, this is why I get annoyed when these coaches are like, they'll rip on fantasy football or sports betting. And it's like half these games no one would care about if it wasn't for fantasy football or sports betting.
Yeah, that was probably the most boring game this season.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's been a few boring ones, but that one definitely gets honorable mention in the top 5.
I don't remember the last time an announcer like Al Michaels in the middle of the game called it a bad game, and it was like I don't remember an announcer just flat out saying that.
That was just not good football.
Yeah,
it wasn't like not even that. It wasn't like sometimes you can get like teams that are playing poorly, but it's still exciting because they're breaking off big plays. There's lead changes. This was just boring and bad. It was like the worst combination.
It was. Yeah, there were almost no big plays the entire night. It was brutal. But hey, 2 aging quarterbacks, not really doing a whole lot. I think this is a good segue because I'm looking at the teams we haven't mentioned. We haven't talked a lot about Will Tam. And if you bring your worksheet back up in a second, and I'm probably gonna have to
re-grant me permission.
This is unbelievable. Like, what am I doing over here? All right, you should be good. But I do have it on my computer, and like Tam and Edwin are almost like they have the same exact pick value, and Tam's only 30 points less on player. Yeah, so that's the 30 point on player is the one difference between the two. And we had said Edwin's very balanced. So I'm interested to see what Will Tam's team looks like.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a team that has had a drastic turnaround here in just 12 months.
Yeah. Well, the first pick always helps, and we see that at the top of the charts here.
His team actually reminds me a lot of yours in terms of the steepness of the curve here, and that he's another team that doesn't necessarily have like a 70 point, 80 point like stud.
Yeah.
Up there, but he has a lot of very good complementary pieces. And
I'm just gonna say the distribution here, it's not going down a whole lot. He's just got a lot of like solid guys.
Yeah, and it's a lot of guys too that I think are on the upswing here. I mean, Brees, obviously. Trevor Lawrence looks like a new player. That is no longer kicking people at practice. Like Bateman, Sutton, both very solid. Not going to light the world on fire, but very solid wide receivers.
Yeah,
I mean, you've got people like Jameson who all the hype in the world. I mean, he comes back from that leg injury. I mean, I think expectations are sky high for what he's going to be able to do, especially in that offense that is, always playing from behind.
Yeah.
And then just really a lot of just very solid players as you get further down the roster here. I mean, guys like Edwards-Helaire, Miles Sanders, Kareem Hunt, Hawkinson had that huge week last week.
Yeah, I'm aware. What a farce that was. That guy's not going to sniff 20 plus points the rest of the season. gets 35, but that's not the only reason I lost. It was a good win for Tam. But yeah, no, Edwards-Helaire and Sanders have had really good seasons. Talk about projection based though. Malik Willis at 27. I mean, this is a guy who like he's either going to be like a top 12 fantasy quarterback or he's never going to start.
Yeah, but I mean, I would argue when you think about if you lined up like Trey Lance, versus Malik Willis here, I mean, Lance has a ton like more value according to these rankings. I'd argue they're really not all that different. They're both unpolished, mobile quarterbacks, big arms, a lot of potential, but haven't demonstrated anything.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the draft capital, really. What, the 4th overall
yeah,
pick versus a 3rd round pick, pretty much.
and that's that. At least in my mind, that's the main difference there. So, I mean, Malik Willis could very well be, fast forward a year or a year and a half or so, and he takes over the tail. I mean, he could very well be a superstar.
Yeah, he could. I'm kind of kicking myself for not using I think I had the 212, no, the 210. And I didn't, I passed on Malik Willis. So kicking myself a little bit for that in the rookie draft.
I will say that, for every Josh Allen, there's a million other names that just fade into nothingness in practice squads and European football. So
it's very yeah, definitely very true. Solid team. Yeah, it does look a lot like mine and Edwin's. Very, very similar, the division mates over there. Travers, we haven't clicked into Travers yet. Outside of just picking on the draft day trade.
Yeah, I mean, same story as Ben. He has a lot tied up in picks.
Yeah.
And high first round picks too. So, I mean, I think this is squarely where he said he was going to be when he started selling, expected. But I mean, I draw a lot of parallels between his team and Ben's team. That it really depends on how well they can draft and whether they actually hit their picks.
Yeah. What are your feelings on Ben's ability to draft? Just give you a little bit of a soapbox here.
Ben does a lot of prep. I will say, I think it remains to be seen how well that translates into picking ability.
Okay. Well, I can confirm you weren't at the draft. Ben was in the pool the majority of the time. So he was kind of just in the pool waiting for his 1/3 round pick. I think I don't want to misquote him, but I think there was a little bit of a laugh on the Dameon Pierce selection.
Well, you know what? He can laugh all he wants. He's in my starting lineup. So
yeah, it was a solid 2nd round pick, no doubt about it. But yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see like the Ben and Travers and what they do with their draft picks. And I know at some point last year, I had 4 picks in the 1st round of last draft, and I traded 2 for vets, picked 2 players. So I personally like to mix my veteran, like I know what it is, what I'm getting back in return versus a rookie, but very interesting to see if these guys do make all their selections.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, I heard that it's a very deep running back class this year. And I think there's definitely some top tier talent across, premium positions here. Stroud and Young, you've got Gibbs and Bijan, Addison, JSN. Maybe you throw the LSU guy, I'm blanking on his name, in there. So, I mean, it's always tough to even like the pros get it wrong projecting from college to the NFL. So you never know, but it certainly seems like there's a lot of promise that Travers and Ben would be able to tap into.
For sure. Well, I think we've covered everyone. I'm looking here. We talked John B, Ben, Edwin, Tam, Alex, myself, Travers. We talked about Mark and we talked about John. So I guess my question for you, going back to the total value here, if you had to trade teams, complete teams with anyone, who in the league here based on this analysis, and of course these are just numbers, a guide, like what other team other than yours would you like to be?
Oh, that is tough. That's a tough question. I'd have to say it's probably either you or Tam.
All right, interesting.
As I think our teams are built in similar ways, in that there's a lot of, and not to say that there's not great players on all three of our teams, but there's a lot of a focus on making sure you have the right bench depth.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say that probably, just like philosophy wise, I think that aligns a lot. And I like the amount of young talent on both your team and Tam's team, like players who are in their second or third year, who really started to show promise, because I'm sort of in the same camp as you. Like, draft picks are great. I love drafting, but if I can get someone that has actually shown that they can do it in the league, I kind of lean that way.
Okay. All right. That's where I lean. That's how I built my team. So I'm a little honored. For sure. Like I'm gonna leave your team out too in my conversation a little bit here. I would say I would want to be either you or Ben going forward if I had to move on from mine. And I think the thing with Ben is there's a lot of potential with the picks, but you know how I operate. I would love to go through an off season with those picks and just make those moves. And like I'm not going to be drafting all of them in the first round, but I'm going to be getting some veterans. I'm going to be getting some top end draft picks. But what I really like about Ben's is Allen, Jefferson, Pittman, Godwin, Gabe Davis should be about half the value of that 35 right there. But I mean, all joking aside, like he's got the top end talent and the draft pick assets to like fill in the rest of the roster. So I think that would be a really fun team to manage this offseason.
Yeah, I am glad to hear you say that about Gabe Davis. I know that has been a point of vigorous discussion over the last 3-4 months about whether or not he's actually a talented wide receiver. So
I just think he's all role based in terms of like I think he's a solid player. And he can start for you, but he's probably the best number 2 they've had there, but that's not saying a whole lot. They haven't really had a number 2 there to pair with Stephon Diggs. And I just think he doesn't really separate that well. And we can blame it on the ankle injury, but I think this is kind of what you get from a player like Gabe Davis.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And at some point, like, he could beat out Manny Sanders last year, right? And I understand that, like, maybe week to week, like coaches wanting to get that experience on the field and everything, but like at some point they're playing to win. Like, they're a playoff team. If he was actually better, like noticeably better, like actually more talented, I think he would have seen the field more last year.
Yeah,
I think we're seeing it this year too. And that, like, you could swap him out for just about. There's probably like 10, 20 other guys you could swap him out for and be exactly the same. And I think so much of his value is just tied to the fact that he's playing with Josh Allen, not the fact that he's actually a talented receiver.
agreed. Yeah, no, that's definitely my take on him as well.
I will get off the soapbox.
Well, I couldn't just give Ben the credit of saying I would love to be his team this offseason and then also not take a little bit of a pot shot at Gabe Davis. But thanks for putting this together. I mean, this is awesome. I don't want to offer out for you, but if anyone in the league's curious and poking around, are you able to send it out for anyone who puts their personal email on in the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. We have phone numbers pinned, right? Not emails.
Yeah, we have phone numbers, not emails. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to email it around. If anybody wants this, just drop your email in the chat.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks for putting it together. And before I let you go, I do want to discuss the trade that went down today between John B and Mark DeMellon. I know Mark had been reaching out to a bunch of us separately, so we started to figure something was in the works but then it comes down. Was it around like noontime today? I guess you're 3 hours behind. So, whatever time it came down, Mark acquired Rashad Penny and Chase Edmonds for the cost of a 2020, so a second rounder in 24, a second rounder in 25, and a third rounder in 25. Your take, Jim.
So, I mean, to be a little, to ruffle some feathers about this, it feels like it's kind of like rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic for both teams. I mean, not to say that it's necessarily a bad trade, but I mean, John B clearly not competing this year, trading away players who are on the younger side at a position where there's a bit of scarcity. And I think Mark's team, when you look at it, running back was never really the issue. It's wide receiver depth and wide receiver. That said, I do think John, at least for my checks, I think John won this trade.
Okay.
Because if you think about his timeline, like obviously tanking right now. Still, I assume he's tanking. Yeah.
I mean, I think at this point it's becoming the legal tank at this point.
He's in line, I should say. He is a good war chest of guys. He's in line to get some picks this year. Like he's clearly, I think, going to be in good position to really start. The other half of that and on the upswing in 2023, 2024, 2025. So he's accumulating assets that I think are going to be very helpful during that period when, I think he's really going to be trying to compete. And it's not necessarily fast forward a year, all of a sudden that 2024 second is a second round pick in the upcoming draft. And that you could flip that for a player, for a flexion trade. So
you can, yeah.
I think timeline wise, I like that. And I think that, as Mark thinks about competing this year, these players definitely help, right? There's certainly both, especially Penny been very productive this year. Chase Edmonds maybe not quite so much. But I think the issue is wide receiver depth. I think that's where he was lacking, and this doesn't do anything to address that.
Yeah, I think so. I like your comparison of rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic more so for Mark, because I don't think the Titanic intentionally sunk itself the way John B is currently running the ship right now. But you look at Mark's team, I think there's just a refusal to acknowledge where it is in its development track. And of the teams, I think last year Mark and John drafted the most for the current and the startup. Mark drafted especially old, so he needed to win last year, maybe this year. He's had so many like injuries and like Hopkins being out. Now he doesn't have Michael Thomas, Burks and Dotson are hurt. Like at 1-3, having only played the weaker of the two divisions, in my opinion, going into matchups against your team and John's team, I think it's going to be really hard for him to come back. And I see this trade as him refusing to acknowledge that. I mean, he had a big week last week, and I think he's overrating that is what I'm trying to say. I think he thinks that that's what it's going to be like going forward. And I just don't see that with his team. Now, that said, I actually think he won this trade, because my argument is I don't give a rat's ass about a third round pick in 2025. Like that's like, I mean, whatever, like that's worth like a waiver wire player to me at this point. But yeah, John B got 2 seconds, but it's 2 years out and 3 years out. And like, to me, if you're Mark, like you didn't give up any assets that are really going to help you turn around the program in the next 2 years, and he can reacquire picks by selling players later. So I think as a small buy-in, it's good because he gave up picks that were so far out, and he has time to reshape the deck, rearrange the Titanic when it's a new ship at the end. But I really like, I don't mean to be so harsh. I do think he's in a situation where he's waiting too long to sell. And this definitely compounds it a little bit. But that said, I do like the value of the trade for him.
Yeah. We say that his team's in the downswing here, then watch him go rip off like 8 straight wins here.
Oh yeah, we're gonna reverse jinx him, right? And then he's gonna like point to this. He's gonna laugh in our face, but I mean,
giving
it's like
his team bulletin board material right now. It's gonna be pinned up in the locker room. Our faces.
Well, he's going to Vegas this weekend, so hopefully, he could listen to this on the plane or something and forget about it. Maybe he'll forget about it when he wins some money in Vegas. But I mean, to do a little bit of a deeper dive here, I'm trying to get to the website for Sleeper is not nearly as good as the app, but you look at Mark. All right, so you look at the guys he just got. Chase, where's Edmonds? Oh, in the starting lineup. That's great. Well, I mean, Edmonds is 8.5 points, 4.6, 15.2, and 9. Like, I guess the 9 and 8 he's usable, but like really only happy on 1 week that he played so far. And then you bring up like Rashad Penny, who is a really talented player, but 7.7, 1.5, 7.4, 28 against Detroit. Like, and we know what's going on in Detroit right now. They can't stop anybody and they just score boatloads of points. So I think he got good players, startable flex players. I don't think he moved the needle to come back from 1-3 this season, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, we'll see. I mean, I think a lot of this is going to depend on, really just Derrick Henry, regain his full form of, putting up 25 points a week. Does Connor have some touchdown regression, or has he still become a goal line back here for the Cardinals? Like, I don't know. It's too tough to tell. Does Brady, without the distraction of his family, just refocus all his energy into throwing 6 touchdowns every single week?
Yeah.
Who knows? I agree with your take here, but I think, it could go either way. We'll have to see.
Yeah, the NFL is a crazy place for sure. And the players you mentioned are interesting. Derrick Henry, James Conner, his contract, he's going to be there this year, next year. But I feel like a guy like James Conner had more value this offseason than he currently does. And I feel the same way with Derrick Henry. And I think at their age, like, that's just going to keep happening. So the longer he waits to rebuild this thing, I think the more difficult it's going to be on him.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I guess the gamble is that, who cares about future value if they're helping you win now and you think you can compete now? So
yeah,
that's the, I don't know, the other side of the coin, I guess.
Yeah. And I think on the other side for John B, it's like, if I were him and I were selling these pieces, I think I would have really pushed for 2023 and 2024 assets as opposed to 4 and 5. So like, that's sort of where I look at it from John B's perspective, because I think John B is one of the better like rookie scout picks, especially at like receiver, like his Drake London pick, his George Pickens pick. I think he's one of the better scouters we have in this league. My concern for him is from a macro perspective on the team. Is he ever going to give up the quality picks or assets necessary to build a team that's a contender in our league? Or is he just going to like, be an average team every year, make a great draft pick? It's just the slow build is just such a hard way to go, I would say.
It's a hard way to go, but at the same time, like, if it works, if you do well for like 2 or 3 drafts, all of a sudden you have you've got a core of 23, 24-year-old players who are producing, and all of a sudden you're then competing for the next decade. So yeah. I see both sides.
It's the mad, as Ben says, it's the Madden rebuild. It's exactly what, like, I saw your Madden teams. This is what you were trying with the Boss Hogs.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be telling, I think. To an extent, I think a lot of last draft almost got dictated by the startup draft in terms of people doubling down on where they were. where they started out from the initial draft, people, continuing with what their plans were. I think this offseason, we're going to see some changes in trajectory for certain teams, where people who may be in the middle decide, I don't have what it takes to take the next step. I'm going to start selling and tearing down and acquiring, picks and future assets. And there might be people that, were in the middle, but they look in their core and they start buying. I think we're going to see some pretty drastic changes in terms of how we're thinking about tiering and ultimately competition in 2023 this offseason. Right?
Yeah, I could see that too. And the one thing I did check John B's draft picks after this, and I was like, holy cow, it's like, at least in terms of sheer volume, it's quite the war chest. It's not like the Ben, like the top jewels on top type war chest, but he's got a lot stuffed in there.
Yeah, definitely a volume play. But if only 1 in 4 third round picks hit, but you make 4 of them, like you probably got somebody. So
yeah, true. And he definitely hit on London, and I would argue he's already hit on Pickens as well. They look really good for him.
Yeah, everyone needs to just follow whatever the Steelers are doing, picking wide receivers. Like that, they're just head and shoulders better, I think, than anybody else in the league at identifying talent.
Yeah, unlike the Patriots, but we'll see what Ty God does.
Hey, you mean Randy Moss 2.0?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, skinny Randy Moss coming down. But no, this has been awesome. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you putting that together, and it's been great having you on the podcast. I'm a little jealous Saquon's going off for you, but I can get over that, But thanks for joining, Jimmy, and good luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, likewise. I look forward to seeing you in the playoffs.
As long as the quarterbacks get healthy, I hope I can see you as well. So, all right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for listening. And hopefully we can do these a little bit more on the weekly basis going forward. But from the All Aboard Podcast, Brandon and Jimmy, we'll see you guys next time.